The next of the condition which we will discuss would be about the rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, the exact causes of the rheumatoid arthritis are not known, and very often it was believed and it is also now popularly believed as an autoimmune disorder. Though it's an autoimmune pathology, rheumatoid pathology is triggered due to some other illness or an injury or habits like smoking. These are well established triggering factors as such. There is no standard laboratory test to confirm rheumatoid arthritis. You will have the tests like rheumatoid factors, RF or rheumatoid factor study would be a positive only in around 40 to 50% of the rheumatoid pathology. So a large number of patients would not be able to be diagnosed with the RA factor assessment in the lab, and hence there was a categorization of seronegative rheumatoid arthritis and seropositive rheumatoid arthritis. That kind of a categorization now has become somewhat obsolete, but earlier days we used to have that kind of a categorization. Then ACPA or anti-cerulinated protein antibody is considered as now more sensitive to make the diagnosis of rheumatoid factor than rheumatoid arthritis than RA factor as such. These are certain of the issues. About the causative factor for the rheumatoid arthritis, there is a general now trend to consider the diet abnormality of the gut, gastrointestinal tract, and the diet relationship with the rheumatoid arthritis. That's one of the issues which is becoming popular, and there is a huge number of medical literatures, recent medical literatures, where the relationship with the gut conditions, particularly the microbiological status of the gut and the abnormality of absorption being related to the rheumatoid arthritis, this kind of a theory is coming up. And of course it is also true that the status of the gut, gastrointestinal tract, and relation with the lots of other diseases is the current trend of development. When we consider Agni, Ama and so on from Ayurvedic point of view, that's the real situation where the abnormality is produced due to the abnormality of the Agni, and that kind of a theory is now being accepted, though partially, in the contemporary system. So from Ayurvedic point of view, we should not leave that theory. We should, of course, initially very often people would say your theory of gastrointestinal tract abnormality like Agni and Ama so on would not be relevant, but now gradually there is a tendency for the acceptance as such. So I would always say that future problems or answers which will come in the future, they are already recorded in Ayurvedic texts earlier. That's about the issue. So most of the times diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis is based upon the clinical criteria than the laboratory investigations. And the clinical criteria, there are major criteria, minor criteria. That's how used to be present in the textbooks earlier, but that kind of a trend also is now being gradually changed. The primary criteria for diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis is a morning stiffness for more than 1 hour, and a arthritis or pain involving 3 or more joints and a duration of 6 weeks, more than 6 weeks. And involvement of the hand joints is one of the most common presentation in case of the rheumatoid arthritis, but you will have a large number of patients who may not have involvement of the hand joints. It could be the other joints also. Then symmetric arthritis is another of the characteristic feature of the rheumatoid arthritis, but this also is not universal. It need not symmetric in the sense similar joints on both the sides being involved, but that also is not mandatory. But these are certain of the clues by which a clinical diagnosis can be made. Rheumatoid nodules which are characteristically seen, they are always confirmatory. Then you have rheumatoid factor positive, that's also confirmatory, or now ACPA, which also is somewhat confirmatory. Then radiographic changes typical of the rheumatoid arthritis also are seen. I will show you some examples of that radiological changes of the rheumatoid arthritis. Then staging of the rheumatoid arthritis are of different types. So usually there are very popular, there are 2 types of the staging. One is the clinical staging based upon the clinical presentation, which is as the early stages of rheumatoid arthritis, where the pain is somewhat vague and inconsistent and often difficult to diagnose. So that's considered as the first stage. A second, and your serologically the patient would be negative at that stage. Then you will have the patients where the antibodies are formed and hence they could be identified in the laboratory test either by RA test or ACPA test. Symptoms could be atypical, that's called as a second stage. Then a clinical identifier stage, when you go by the clinical identification, it will be only in the third stage, and that's why the prognosis of rheumatoid arthritis is always considered as poor because the diagnosis is usually late. Fourth stage is where there is a obvious deformity, significant deformity, joints becoming fused and other complications tend to occur. Classification of the rheumatoid arthritis, now the current trend, earlier when we used to study was something different, but now the classification and scoring, assessment of the severity of rheumatoid arthritis 2010 criteria is based upon the involvement of the joints and swelling in the joints as such. So when one medium level joint, that's medium level in the sense smaller joints are finger joints, whereas medium level wrist or elbow, when any one of such joints are involved, then the score would be 0, or when more than 2 or 2 to 10 medium or large joints are involved, then the score would be 1. When 1 to 3 smaller joints are involved, the score will be 2, and 4 to 10 smaller joints are involved on both sides, then it's 3, and greater than 10 joints involved is the score is 5. Or similarly serological test, when the serologically negative 0, and when it is positive after at least in one test, then of course its score is 2, and consequently then it is a 3. When the titer value is high, then it's considered 3. Duration is another scoring factor. So these scoring factors are important to predict about the prognosis of the rheumatoid arthritis. There is another classification of the rheumatoid arthritis as a difficult to cure rheumatoid arthritis or the comparatively moderately easy to be treated. So those patients who have a score of more than 6 is considered as a difficult to cure, less than 6 is considered as a moderately easy to be managed as such. So there is another method of diagnosing this, assessing this prognosis. Now all these are significant, important from the point of view of predicting the prognosis and selection of the patients. Which of the patients can manage it or not, these criteria are very crucial. And another method of assessing that prognosis is based upon a swollen metacarpophalangeal joint, or then the score would be 1.5. Then swollen hip joints, then it's the 1.5. Wrist is involved, then 1.6. Hand tenderness is when there is a gross hand tenderness, it's 1.8. Then acute phase responses, where the patient would have a acute condition and progressive condition, then 1.2, and this way the score could be made. And a ULR score of more than 4 is considered, more than 5 is considered as severe and difficult to be treated. A grading also is done, another complicated formula, that's DAS 28 ESR formula, where ESR is another of the criteria to suggest about the severity of the disease. I think there was one question in the last session, like how the ESR is important. Of course, ESR is considered to be one of the measure to suggest about the severity of the inflammation, and there is a complex formula. These are important from the research point of view, and if the DAS score is of less than 2.6, that's a sign of remission. So, and this also is based upon the same factors like number of tender joints and the total disease activity based upon the severity of the pain, which we call as visual analog scale, and erythrocyte sedimentation rate and CRP, and then you will have a complex formula of 0.56, 0.28 and so on. If at all you are very much interested, there is no need to calculate by yourselves. You have very popular websites where you give these scores, the results are given, the points are given immediately. So, or you may use the formula to calculate. Anyway, if at all you are interested in seeing like whether the patient's disease activity is really reducing or not, this score could be of some importance, but routinely I don't say that they are very much critical, whereas the ULR and the initial scaling will be important to predict the prognosis and suggestion of the treatment. It's not that rheumatoid arthritis is limited only to the joints. A rheumatoid arthritis patient also can have involvement of other organs of the body. Either it could be pulmonary, where there could be interstitial lung disorders, or Kaplan's nodules seen in the lungs. I will show you some examples later. There could be a cardiac abnormality, the atherosclerosis could be more, there could be even pericarditis. Then in the skin also vasculitis and rheumatoid nodules could be presented. A patient of rheumatoid arthritis also tend to develop myelopathy very commonly in the cervical segment. There could be involvement of the eyes where there could be inflammation of the episclera, or hematologic conditions like amyloidosis, Felty syndrome, where there could be either splenomegaly or a deposition of the amyloid substances also could be seen as the complications. And it's quite important to assess this. A patient of rheumatoid arthritis is not only a joint pathology, you need to assess these conditions. Particularly the pulmonary pathology, where there could be interstitial lung disorders. You can see these interstitial markings becoming more prominent in the plain X-ray or in the CT scan. CT scan would be rather more accurate to suggest about the interstitial changes in the lungs, or the Kaplan's nodules, where you will see these nodular changes seen, and they are also better seen in the CT scan, where you can see this nodular fibrosis occurring in the lungs. A pulmonary involvement in the rheumatoid arthritis is always suggests about a poor prognosis, and the total duration of the treatment and outcome also is not very much satisfactory, and these are critical when you take the patient for the treatment and take the confidence of the patient as such. The vasculitis seen characteristically, rheumatoid vasculitis is characteristically presented as very small spots, minor spots distributed in the extremities, often in the palm or in the legs, where you will see reddish rashes, but rashes will not be really palpable. Rarely in very severe conditions there even could be necrosis of the tips. These are not common, but a rare presentation where there could be necrosis. Ischemic changes can occur even in case of rheumatoid vasculitis. More commonly you will see the rheumatoid nodules. The nodules are very characteristic, where you will have subcutaneous tender nodules, somewhat firm, and there can be even the deformities. In the text you will find lots of names about the typical deformities, swan neck deformity and so on. But the deformities of the rheumatoid arthritis are very characteristic, where in the finger the terminal metacarpophalangeal joints tend to be extended. The second or proximal metacarpophalangeal joints they tend to be flexed. So that's the typical appearance seen in case of the rheumatoid arthritis. So these are all the factors which help you to make the diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis as such. Along with that, rheumatoid arthritis also can have very common other complications which are of some significance when you take the patient for the management as such. A majority of the patients of rheumatoid arthritis would have a psychological depression as a presentation. It could be as a result of the disease, which is very chronic, or multiple factors. Then secondary infection, immunity of the patients are reduced, they are more prone to develop infections, and particularly the risk is more when the patients are prescribed with the immunosuppressant drugs. So when we treat the patients with our Ayurvedic treatment, these are all the issues which we have to consider. Risk of malignancy in rheumatoid arthritis also is high. Lymphomas, lung cancer, skin cancer, incidence of these are quite high in patients of rheumatoid arthritis, particularly those who have some systemic involvement. So, and when a patient comes to us after a long treatment somewhere else, before we select the patient, these are things which we have to assess as such. And it's very common, like there could be many other chronic conditions in a patient with rheumatoid arthritis. It's not only the rheumatoid arthritis, the patient would have many other chronic conditions. This is about a graph of maybe the data suggested by a huge study where patients with rheumatoid arthritis developing the complications of different sorts, like blood pressure, high blood pressure in a patient at the age of around above 45, incidence in a non-rheumatoid patient and incidence in a rheumatoid patient. That green, light green is non-rheumatoid, that dark bluish green column is the rheumatoid patient. So almost every disease which often occurs in the older age the incidence of these diseases are more common in a rheumatoid patient as such. Now, all these informations are important when you have a comprehensive management of rheumatoid arthritis as such. Life expectancy of a rheumatoid arthritis patient also is lesser than the average. This again the data of a similar data of universal data, where the life expectancy of the rheumatoid arthritis is suggested by this broken line, dotted line of course. Diabetes is that the last broken line, so the expectancy is the normal line is the dark line, the straight line, which is considered as the control average, the global average. So early fatal complications in rheumatoid arthritis also is to be expected. These are the issues which we require to make that or select the patient or suggest about the prognosis of the disease condition, to counsel the patient. These are all the facts which we need to consider, and that makes the treatment more acceptable to the patient. Then investigations to confirm the diagnosis, it could be any of these: erythrocyte, that ESR, C-reactive protein CRP, RA factor, and ACPA. These are the standards. In addition to that, a complete blood cell count is necessary to assess the condition of the patient, because a large number of patients of rheumatoid arthritis, they tend to become anemic, either as a result of the previous treatment or due to the reduced activity, or many times the disease itself. The patients who come to you with the rheumatoid arthritis, they may be already having non-steroidal drugs, or at times the disease modifying drugs or the steroids. The problem would be patients who are on steroids as such. Withdrawal of the steroids in such patients who have a long-term steroid prescription would be another tricky issue. If you suddenly withdraw the steroids, there could be severe aggravation and many of the complications would occur. So, when we prescribe our drugs, many times either the steroids may have to be continued, which are already prescribed, though I never prescribe steroids by myself to any of the patients of rheumatoid arthritis. But if a patient is already on steroids for a long duration, it may not be possible to withdraw the steroids in a short duration. It has to be step by step as the patient shows the clinical improvement, and that's a very tricky issue, and lot of clinical experience is needed. Whereas with the other drugs, they can be withdrawn as such. Now, from the Ayurvedic point of view, it's very obviously rheumatoid pathology is the Amavata, where the Mandagni, Viruddhahara are the major causes of the disease, and hence it presents with the typical Stabdha Gatrata, Stabdham Chakurute Gatram Amavata, because of the reduced movement and the pain and swelling. The Abhishyanda of the Sodas producing the exudative swelling are the characteristic feature of the rheumatoid pathology. And the rheumatoid pathology is described with again of either a Vata predominant or Pitta predominant. In the Pitta predominant, you will have acute inflammatory conditions like Sadaharagam, Sashulam. The clinical signs of inflammation, tenderness would be very prominent in case of Pitta pradhana conditions. Whereas in the Angamarda or Aruchi, Trishna, these and Apaka, these are the Amavata or Vata predominant conditions. So we may have to assess these as such. Or a Prakupita Amavata or Prabhuta Amavata, where the patient would have a generalized condition, the multiple issues, where the score would be very high, then where Hastapada Shiroruku, Gulpa, Trika, multiple joints being involved. Now we may have Euler scoring where the number is counted. Now Sushruta has mentioned the same issue in a different language. And Agni Daurbalya, these are the conditions of the third category where there is a Prabhuta Amavata. Now prescription, my management, when I prescribe, in case of Vata predominant conditions where the Gaurava and Angamarda, Aruchi, these are the major presentations, my prescription will be usually Kaishara Gugulu Mrityunjaya Rasa Amrutarishta. Whereas if there is a Pitta Pradhana Lakshanas like Daha or Ragata, reddish discoloration, acute inflammation, instead of Amrutarishta, I would prefer Manjista Adhikvata. Kaishara Gugulu Mrityunjaya, of course, is a common prescription in all the patients of Amavata. Prabhuta Amavata condition, I would prefer Arogyavardhini as a co-prescription. along with Kaishwara Mrityunjaya, because Arogyavardhini I consider as the Dhartvagni Mandyahara, so it will be beneficial to reduce the Dhartvagni Mandya and the Prabhuta Amar can be managed. Agni Chikitsa and Ksharabasti also are the other options of the treatment. And Agni Chikitsa is, as we have referred to earlier also in previous conditions also, one of the common, one of the specific schedule which we have developed in SDM Udupi, and it's just application, local application of the Tikshna Dravyas. Ksharabasti is another dependable condition. And though I will not claim that any rheumatoid arthritis patient would be completely cured, but definitely our treatment would have a better edge than the contemporary system. The caution would be only in those who are obviously difficult to treat conditions, or obviously have the complications like pulmonary complications or other severe complications like severe anemia or susceptibility for the infections, immunocompromised status. These are the conditions which you have to consider. Along with that, another major issue would be the comorbidities. As I told you, we have referred to many of the patients would have some other accompanying pathology, and that makes the management more difficult, which would be very difficult to evaluate or maybe present in a comprehensive manner. There our management can change, but primary approach to the management of rheumatoid arthritis in my practice would be with this kind of regime. Then in case of very difficult to treat cases like DAS having more than 5.1, severe fibrous joints, my prescription would be, along with those basic prescriptions, I would prefer Rasayana Aushadhis like Ashwagandharishta, Abhrakabhasma, Tarpyadi. Rarely, very rarely, Swarnabhasma. Swarnabhasma is another of the drug which is rarely prescribed. In the total my practice, I have not prescribed it in more than 20 patients as such, not more than 20 patients. But it gives some relief in very severe conditions to a certain extent. Instead of Ksharabasti, it could be Virechana Rajayapanabasti, or at times it could be Ksharabasti initially, then followed by Virechana and the Rajayapanabasti, depending upon the patient's status as such. So that's another rather a large number of patients whom we see in our clinical practice would be of this difficult to treat conditions than really the early stages, and they were more common in the early stage of practice, but now of course gradually the trend is changing. We have a good number of patients coming in the early stages also. That's about rheumatoid arthritis in brief. Then another of the controversial variety of the arthritis is reactive arthritis. Now the word reactive arthritis also is somewhat controversial. The issue is a large number of conditions can be categorized as a reactive arthritis. It could be a complication of any infective disorder, and characteristically the presentation would be sudden onset, asymmetric environment, abdominal symptoms are very classical. Diseases like chikungunya and so on, they also come under the same issue, and to go into the detail of reactive arthritis would be very difficult to go into a complete detail in the short duration of 1 hour or 2 hours. So I will be very brief about that. And I will consider all these as Antarvegi Jvara conditions. The characteristic features are the Antardaha Jvara, where there will be Sandhyasti Shulam, Asvedaha, Dosha Bhartyo Vinigraha. So these are the Antarvega Jvara Linga, and these are the conditions where again they come under the same category of Amavata, and my management will be of the same prescriptions like Kaishwara Mrityunjaya, Amritarishta in general. So with that brief, I will end up with that reactive arthritis. To go into the details of reactive arthritis would be quite difficult to within that time limitation as such. Now another of the very common condition which we see clinically is the pain in the back ache conditions. As I told you earlier also, to make an actual correct diagnosis of a real cause of backache and headache, both are real headache for the clinical practitioner. So clinical assessment is a very important issue. To go into that again is a very elaborate issue, so I will try to avoid that. So we will limit to only to those conditions which you can identify as a bone pathology, and in the contemporary clinical practice you will come across a huge number of words like spondylolysis, spondylolisthesis, spondylitis and spondylosis. The meaning often it can be quite confusing. There is no need of that confusion as such. Spondylolysis is that pathology where the intervertebral discs have become somewhat hardened. The normal jelly-like consistency is altered. They tend to become hardened. Spondylolisthesis is as a consequence of that there is a displacement. There is a displacement of the vertebral body. Then it is a spondylolisthesis. Spondylitis is then there is an inflammatory pathology of these intervertebral disc spaces. As a result of the inflammation, there is more of a fibrosis, tendency for the fibrosis. When it is occurring in a larger number of vertebral body involving and then ending in a reduction of the movement, intervertebral disc movement is reduced, then it is ankylosing spondylitis. When the intervertebral discs have become hardened and then fused together, the space is reduced and vertebral bodies they tend to become somewhat fused-like, then it is spondylosis. Of course, all of them are generally named as disc lesions. So instead of going to these finer differences, we can make out as a disc lesion. Again, to go into a very detailed and a methodical approach to the backache is another major issue. I think we will try to avoid that major issue today. Maybe if at all time permits, we can think of that issue later. Then from the clinical point of view, in general, again leaving up all that, the differential diagnosis issues and making the diagnosis as such, leave it as such. If at all we make the diagnosis of these disc pathologies, I would consider them as the Gridhasi, often majority of the conditions, not all. When there is a nerve root compression, that's typically of the Gridhasi, where you will have the typical presentation of Kati Pristha Uru Janudangha pain, and the patient would not be able to raise the leg up. The straight leg raising test would be somewhat positive. They could be considered as a Gridhasi asset. The basic treatment would be the same Gulu preparations, either something like the osteoarthritis where there is a degenerative pathology. So basic prescription would be of the same as such, the medicines, Gokshirati Gulu or Chandraprabha or the Yogarati Gulu combination, depending upon whether it is a Shula Pradhana or Shota Pradhana or whether it is a gross degenerative Dhatu Kshayajanya. So prescription would be the same when I prescribe. Along with that, the Basti would be the other prescriptions, common prescriptions. The Basti again, the choice would be when it is due to the exercise, more of exercise, like rigorous exercise producing the pathology, like what Sushil has said, Rasak Shobhat, Sandhi Parva, Shaitilya, etc. The Nirubhasti is the choice of the treatment. When it is due to a simple bending or local trauma like pathology, and there is a gross bending or abnormality, gross deformity of the joint as such, then it is the Yapana Bastis are prescribed, where there is a Dhatu Kshayajanya Lakshanas, where the patient would have Pristha Kati Graha as the Lakshana, the mobility is reduced. Then if the patient has a very chronic conditions where the rigidity of the joints like Pada Jangur Pristha Katinam Sthirata, along with of course Kshinoshpura selection, that's we will not consider that part. Then in that condition where the patient would have the Kati or Pada Jangha Uru, like radiating pain like conditions, Matra Basti is prescribed. With this we can have a satisfactory result. Maybe at times it could be even local application of the Kati Basti over the Kati area. Kati Basti is prescribed along with that. Medicines would be the same. That's one of the conditions in brief. Next of the condition which we refer to in case of joint pathology and quite common is about the gouts, and lots of controversies are there about the gouts. Gouts often defined as a abnormality of the serum uric acid metabolism, uric acid metabolism. Characteristically, the clinical presentation would be a single joint involvement, and very often a onset would be sudden and often related to the food. The one joint initially, next in due course of time the other joint also could be involved. So sequential involvement of the joints are common, and there could be local abnormality like the toe feel. Radiological evidences are very classical. Either you may see these evidences of the crystals, the hyperdensity areas. Ultrasonography of the joint also gives you a very clear idea of the effusion, the present in the edema in the tendons can be made out. Now, uric acid levels, again there is a lot of issue, is considered as the threshold limit of more than 6 is considered as a threshold limit where the patient may have the pain in the joints. Conventionally, the gouts are considered the disease of the toes, but it's not limited to the toes. Any of the joint could be involved, though toes could be more frequently involved. And from the therapeutic target point of view, the gout, particularly gout, it should be maintained at less than 6 milligram as such. Critical value of the uric acid would be more than 12. This is the standard which is suggested by the standard test reference laboratories. Whereas the laboratories which are giving the results in our status, they consider as 7 as the standard cutoff limit. That is the controversial issue. Again, the controversial issue is about the diet also. The high level of 6 or above is for the Western diet, where non-vegetarian diet is the most commonly used form of the diet, whereas in India, where predominant diet is vegetarian, the obvious level should be lesser. But such a data is not available. Optimized level for Indian food habits is not yet established. And clinically, you will find a large number of patients who would have the presentation of the uric acid induced pain, which is often named as a pseudo gout also. Either it is a gout primarily or a pseudo gout where the patient would have the pain. Level of uric acid level is increasing rapidly. Now, patients, when you go for the investigations, patients having a higher level of uric acid is increasing very rapidly. It also can result in other morbidities. It's not only the joint pain, it can also present with other diseases like hypertension, renal failure. They also are often presented. Level of uric acid is directly related to the diet. A vast study was done in relation to the food intake. Non-vegetarian diet, meat eaten once in a week, meat eaten and very frequently eaten as such would result in an increase in the uric acid level compared to the vegetarian and vegan diet. So studies are done. So non-vegetarian diet and frequency of meat eating is well known to be a triggering factor for the uric acid. The commonly used substances in the kitchen like these curry leaves, shunthi or maybe adamota, these are well known established herbal substances which will have a uricosuric effect. So net uric acid level in a person who is using these condiments in the kitchen would obviously have a lesser precedence for the uric acid as such. Because we are now shifting to the new form of the masalas where these are avoided, rather you have more of that these taste makers and so on, the synthetic substances added to that, the incidence of the uric acid pathology would be increased even in vegetarian patients. And among the other, though it's not in the kitchen substance, hibiscus is again studied in a large number, maybe studies are done where the uricosuric effect of hibiscus are established. Hibiscus daswala, commonly seen plant as such. Management, from the management point of view, I consider those hyperuricemia condition also as amavata. The ama produced as a kodravebhya seva, a abnormal biochemical reaction produced the ama, and my prescription will be the same, Kaishara Mrityunjaya Amatarist, and maybe the Ksharabasti also is prescribed the same. So from the prescription point of view, there is no difference between rheumatoid and the gouty arthritis. Other aspects, of course, dietary factors are quite important. Non-vegetarian diet has to be avoided. Cold, anything below room temperature has to be avoided. Keeping warm also is one of the important issues. With this, I think we will end up today's discussion. Though it's not complete, I don't say that we have discussed all the joint pathologies, but I have tried to cover up the commonly seen clinical conditions and certain of the issues which we need to be sensitized. To conclude, what we have referred to today are review of rickets, osteomalacia, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid and gouts. Clinical experience of handling those above from the above conditions. certain of the controversial issues. The last message is Ayurvedic management of this disease is based upon individualized assessment of the patients, the dosha lakshanas, accompanied complications, etc. Though we have discussed some straightforward equations, it's not that the straightforward equations are not always true in these conditions, because most of these conditions would have some more of the allied local complications, these systemic complications which need to be considered, and clinical experience would be one of the important criteria. With this, I will conclude today's presentation. Thank you for the patient hearing, and I will expect some questions, and if there are any questions, we will try to answer those questions. There is some questions like, any evidence of change in vitamin D and calcium levels after 4 months of river treatment? Of course, there is one question like whether river treatment has shown changes in vitamin D level or not. As I told you, I think I have referred to that issue. For me, it's about that growth chart which is important. So if the patient has shown a proper growth chart, that would be enough. Repetition, and most of the patients have rickets, I don't suggest about that vitamin D study at all, because that vitamin D, as I told you, that whole controversy is about vitamin D level issue. So clinical assessment of the weight gain and normal physical activity would be my criteria to consider the patient as showing a clinical improvement. This question was asked by Sahana Shankaran. Then another question from Vishwanath Gatti. There is a simile that with the Snehana and Svedana, even a dry wood is bent and can be made to be bent. Can we correct the bony deformation to set these normal conditions? And Shushkani Chapi Kasthani Sneha Svedana. Okay, all that is absolutely true. Snehana Svedana would be helping in the rigidity, reducing the rigidity, but not for the bones, not for the disease of the bones. It's about the muscles and maybe the other soft tissues. So from the point of view of helping the patient, that local application of Snehana and Svedana would be limited to the softer tissues to help in the movement rather than the other issue. Then Dr. Gopal Krishnayak, vitamin A and D tablet and leaf 52 syrup gives complete recovery in small children. Okay, fine, leaf 52, I don't question about that part. So there could be many prescriptions as such, fine, so no contradiction about that. Then there is another question, Sahana as such. AP has recommended vitamin D supplementation for 1 year after birth of 400 IU in human milk. That's exactly the point which I refer to as a controversy. I don't suggest that supplementation of vitamin D as a mandatory unless the mother doesn't have sufficient milk or patient cannot be breastfed. So in the patient who or a child who cannot be breastfed, supplementation is necessary, otherwise not. Vitamin D deficiency can mental depression. Yes, of course. At the same time, hypervitaminosis also can produce the mental depression. Again, a question asked by Gopal Krishnayak. So vitamin D deficiency definitely yes can produce the mental depression. Hypervitaminosis also can produce the same issue. So we have to have a balance, and that's exactly the purpose of referring to that controversial issue. Then there is another question: how to differentiate between postmenopausal fibromyalgia and osteoarthritis? See, osteoarthritis would have a classical clinical sign of the abnormality of joint, as I told you, like either the joint space is reduced, range of movement are reduced, or the sense of crepitus, or maybe the osteophytes visible abnormalities. Fibromyalgia is a generalized condition where the tendons will be over the muscle body, is not over the tendons. So that's the basic difference. And from the management point of view also, we have referred that fibromyalgia in the previous presentation. whereas osteoarthritis, dhatukshayaja, that's the exactly how we can make out the differences. Like, then there is another question: what treatment can be done for reduce the synovial fluid secretion? Now that the hypothesis of reduced synovial fluid secretion and osteoarthritis, these are all the controversial issues. Very popularly picked, often the people say that grease in the joint is reduced, Shleshaka kapha is reduced, and so on. Osteoarthritis, every osteoarthritis patient would have that reduced secretion, or maybe at one stage there could be an effusion, inflammation, and fluid could be increased. So reduced is due to the fibrotic changes which occur, and that's always suggestive of the dhatukshayaja. So I categorize those patients where there is an obvious reduction of the fluid and the space is reduced. When the joint space is reduced, that's exactly the evidence of the reduction of the synovial fluid. And in that condition, I have suggested, I usually prescribe the same Dhatukshayajanya Vyadhi, Chandraprabha Gokshara, the Rasayana Aushadhi is prescribed. Then how far Ayurvedic medicine and Basti Chikitsa help in OA? How far in the sense that question was asked by Nanda Acharya. I would say the social acceptance, a better social acceptance about the osteoarthritis treatment. People would always prefer an Ayurvedic treatment over the contemporary treatment in general, and hence I think that's a proof of it. Though I may not have any very objective study done in comparison to the contemporary treatment, that's not the issue. People's perception definitely is one of the important criteria. I think that would be very a brief answer to that question. Then there is one question by Lalit Counsel, like why Gokshirari Gugulu is used in osteoporosis. As such, Gugulu is a drug of choice in case of Astigata Vata. Gokshirati Gugulu would be predominantly used in case of a Shotha or maybe even any Vata Kapaja Lakshanas. So, in case of osteoporosis, when there is a edema also, Gokshirati Gugulu could be one of the important issues. Then Gopal Krishna Nayak has suggested exercise is important to improve the strength of the joint, supportive muscles and ligaments. Is it, sir? Yes, that's true. That's exactly the point. Exercise is absolutely essential to ensure that the joint will be safe and the degenerative changes are reduced. Then another question by Dr. Vishwanath. Since Gugulu is a resin and availability of such large amount is doubtful, how can we rely on Gugulu preparation? Of course, that's a totally different aspect of the question. We have to rely upon whatever is available. Of course, presence of such frauds or maybe below quality preparations is one of the problems which we face, and I think that's beyond the scope of what we can discuss here. But I don't think that the current system of medicine doesn't have that kind of a problem. Availability of the quality or quality of the medicine is a problem for everyone. So that maintaining the quality and assuring the quality of the medicine is another issue which we have to keep in mind. So from my point of view, when I prescribe medicines, I don't prescribe medicines. I keep the medicines in stock and dispense the medicines to my patients. That's one of the way by which I can tackle that problem to a certain extent. Again, I don't say that as such. Then Gopal Krishna has asked another question. What about arteritis, inflammation of the artery? I think that's a point which we have referred to the vasculitis and the different varieties of vasculitis in a previous session where we have discussed about the Raktaja Vyadhis. So I think we have discussed about all that different varieties, levels of the vasculitis, minor vessels, major vessels and their consequences, and I consider them as Vatarakta, variations of the Vatarakta and management of the Vatarakta in brief. Then there is another question. In swollen joints shows Chavana Shava Varna as such. Shava Varna what should be the prescription. And that's I think what I have suggested. That's about the suggestion of Pittaja Vyadhi, and usually I prescribe Mangista. Of course, any other Pitta Shamga Chikitsa could be used. Right. Another question by Gopal Snack. What about Rasna and Erandasa? So Rasna I have referred to. Rasna is definitely one of the Bhatashamaka Aushadhis and more preferable in case of Astigata Vyadhi. Erand of course is another drug of choice, but in my prescription I generally do not use Eranda quite frequently because of the purgative property which may not be acceptable to all the patients. Of course Eranda also theoretically is a very good drug, but I don't have much experience with using Eranda. Then can our medicines make R factor negative? And yes sir, to normal. Yes, of course, to a great extent. Not all. Again, I have told that very clearly. We can't claim that every patient of rheumatoid arthritis can be cured. But patients with the low ULR scores or DS scores, definitely yes, to a large number of patients it can be made, RA factors can become negative. But in advanced difficult to treat category patients, don't expect that as such, but titer value would be reduced. It may not be normal, but titer value could be reduced in the course of time with the treatment. Particularly Basti Chikitsa, Basti Kshara Basti produces a significant change in the biochemical parameters as such. When Kshara Basti in the context of RA is Vaitarana, Manjistadi or RA prescribed with the Foltrax, Methotrexate and etc. I think I have given that, I have clarified that issue. Like if the patient is on steroids, withdrawal of the steroids would be quite difficult. And with all the other drugs like Methotrexate and so on, when I start with the treatment, I would be definitely stopping those medicines without any hesitation except for the steroids. Steroids cannot be stopped suddenly, so they need to be tapered. So if at all there is any co-prescription, it could be about the steroids. Then as I told you, I would not be prescribing steroids myself for any of the patients, but if the patient is already on steroids when he comes to me, I may not stop that suddenly, and it cannot be stopped suddenly. Then there is another question from Shruti. Among extra-articular manifestations of RA, any nephrological disorders? Yes, of course. Nephrological disorders, renal pathologies also are a complication of the rheumatoid arthritis, though not as frequent as that of the pulmonary complications. And whether it is due to the steroid treatment or whether it is due to the drugs, that's a questionable argument point of view. But of course, rheumatoid arthritis patients often can have a renal pathology as such. Then recommendations for ASC for RA. I think there is one question, Prasanna Patnaik. ASO for RA. No. Okay, ASO titer is rheumatic pathologies and RA is for the rheumatoid pathologies, and these are different issues. ASO pathology, rheumatic pathology is a issue which we have not covered in today's presentation. It's one of the variations of the Dwara, maybe one of the Antarbhega Dwara, and of course the prescription, my prescription would be the same, but assessment and the outcome would be a totally different issue. That's all. Then of course there are something like thank you, then questions like Vrishtigadamshavat Vedana, Vishavat kind of pain is important in understanding the diagnosis. Of course, that's very typical in case of gouty arthritis, where the pain will be quite acute and sudden, and that's the typical of that Vrishtigadamshavat. That's the Amavata Lakshanas. Cervical spondylitis drugs, I think that's a point which we really didn't go into detail, but for me, whether it is a cervical or lumbar spondylitis is the same, and my prescription would be the same. My categorization would be of the same category, like whether it is a Shodha Pradhana, Shula Pradhana or Dhatukshayajanya. Then of course the major point is about the differential diagnosis and the exact type of the causes which are to be assessed. and there are many critical conditions, quite severe conditions, which can mimic a spondylitis. So differentiating that would be one of the major issues. So, and going into the detail is beyond the scope of what we can discuss in 1 hour today. So we can think of that issue in detail maybe on some other day. Please comment on diagnosis of seronegative RA. That's exactly by the clinical parameters. That's what we have referred to. In rheumatoid arthritis, it is the clinical diagnosis which is more important than the biochemical or laboratory diagnosis. So that's the point. And, there is another more of Pittaja Lakshana, sir, where Mahamanjistadikvata is better, as you said earlier. Okay, Manjistadikvata in Pittaja Lakshana, Dr. Gopal Nayak agrees with me. That's all. That's not a question. Then please show some light on repetitive stress syndrome commonly seen in people. Of course, when we say repetitive stress syndrome, one of the important causes is Nidana Parivarjana. So that has to be avoided quite obviously. And then the other part is the same management as we have discussed, like it is the Sandhigata Vata. The same principles. The basic issue is about proper identification of the condition and then avoiding that wherever possible. Regular exercises are also important. Then importance of using Avarta Taila capsules. I have not prescribed that Avarta Taila in my practice, so I don't know. I won't comment on that. Then what is the role of Gugulu Tiktaka Ghrita in musculoskeletal disorders? Of course, again the same issue. In my prescription, I rarely use Ghrita preparations, but Gugulu Tiktaka Ghrita I usually prescribe in the patients where Shodhana is done. Before the Vamana or the Virechana, particularly in rheumatoid arthritis, when Virechana has to be done, for the Snehana I would prefer Gugulu Tiktaka Ghrita, but I don't prescribe the Ghrita preparations as a regular preparation as such. These are all the points which we have discussed in an earlier session, where I have discussed about the rationality of my prescriptions with a limited number of drugs. Then, sir, what treatment can be given to carpal tunnel syndrome? Carpal tunnel syndrome is a Margavaranjanya Vata Prakopa, and my usual prescription would be Ekagravira, Gokshiradi Gugulu to reduce that Margavaranjanya. And if there is a atrophy of the muscles along with that carpal tunnel, it will be Abhrakavasma Tapya, the same Dhatukshayajanya with that approach. So either Margavaranjanya, when there is an atrophy, it is a Dhatukshayajanya Vata Prakopa. That's how I manage that. Then what can we prescribe for from Ayurveda with vitamin D deficiency? As I told you, it's not the deficiency which is important, it's about the ability to assimilate the vitamin from the body, and that's why I prescribe either Kumari Asava or Aravind Asava or Arogyavardhini, the Dhatukshaya, maybe Dhatagni Mandya, which has to be tackled, than really supplementing vitamin D. But I don't say that all 100% of patients can manage with that. Rarely you have a real deficiency in genetic pathology conditions that there it could be used like. Why you have not prescribed Simhanada Gugulu? Of course, there are many other hundreds of other drugs which I am not using. I am using only some 40 drugs in total my practice. That's what I have already referred to. So to those questions like why you have not used the other drugs, I think I have answered that question in the beginning. Because I use only limited number of drugs, I can prescribe the drugs more authentically, maybe with better perception as such. I think same question was repeated by somebody else, like why Simhanada Gugulu is not prescribed. Then Ayurveda का concept को समझिए रहेगा नहीं, see more. There is something like Ayurveda ka आयुर्वेद कॉन्सेप्ट को समझने के लिए पीएमएस छात्रों को ठीक सर देयर इज सम सजेशन अबाउट दैट आई थिंक दैट्स नॉट अ क्वेश्चन व्हिच नीड टू बी आंसर्ड देन देयर इज सम क्वेश्चन लाइक कॉस्ट फॉर लिपोमा एंड ट्रीटमेंट आई थिंक again, that's not related to the today's topic, lipoma, but anyway, lipoma needs excision that cannot be managed with the medical treatment. Then use of Chavana Taila, Dhanvantara Taila, use of Dhanvantara Taila or Kshirabala. I think that's definitely yes. Dhanvantara or Kshirabala Taila can be used as a Brahmana. I usually prescribe this for the Basti than really the local application. See, local application of Dhanvantara or Kshirabala would not produce the same relief as that of the liniments being used. So patient would not accept that for the local users. They would prefer a liniment which is Tikshna. So I would prefer to use that. I prescribe that for the Sneha Basti. When I say Sneha Basti, usually it's Dhanvantara Taila or occasionally Kshirabala Taila. Then you told no irritants application in arthritis. Then that's I don't prescribe at all. That's I wrote out very clearly that I don't prescribe those at all as such. That's all. I think I have answered almost all the questions. Like, in which avastha of musculoskeletal disorders Kaishora Gugulu is indicated? When there is a Rakta Dushti Lakshanas. When there is a Rakta Dushti Lakshana, Kaishora Gugulu is indicated along with that. And of course in Dhatu Kshayajanya Vyadhi also I prescribe the same along with the Chandraprabha. I think that's almost all the questions are answered to a satisfactory. With that, we will end the session today.